Well, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. Well, we're here with Andrew Ryan. He talks about himself as having two first names, and he doesn't care which one you use. So I'm glad to be able to use either Andrew or Ryan. But he had some questions that he wanted to ask me about trusts and especially funding of trusts. So we decided to do just a little question and answer period here. So we're going to talk for a little bit, and hopefully I'll have good answers for your questions.
Where this came up was when I'm doing a mortgage for someone, 100% of the time the question comes up whether they're currently vested in a trust, because if they are, I have to go through a legal review of the trust, make sure it's acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, then looking out for clients' best interest, it's always, well, I need to get you connected to someone so we can get that in place. But it's the same thing as asking about your credit score or your income. The trust is always a question.
Yeah.
And so often people will go through the step of establishing revocable trust, but they don't create a bank account. And so they can't negotiate funds from the proceeds of the sale. If it's cash out refinance, they can't negotiate the check for the cash out.
Yeah.
And so preparing for that, it's always something I ask people. And something that I was thinking of on the way over, it's so important that people fund the trust, take that step after they've met with you, because you can't establish the bank account for them. They leave here with their folder and all their stuff, and then they never open an account
again. Yeah.
And you see that, don't you?
Yep.
So there's some common workarounds that I see, and I wanted to ask you if these are ever acceptable, or should they be avoided at all costs.
Sure.
I'll give you the first example. So I don't have a bank account in my trust, but I have it in my personal name with the trust as the beneficiary. Tell me, is that ever acceptable, or should it be avoided at all costs? Tell me about that.
Okay. Yeah. So we find that a lot of the time we are dealing with educating our clients simply with the language of death, right?
Yeah.
So people get confused with who the executor is and who the trustee is. Yeah. What a trust account is versus what a personal account is, what the trustee can actually do. So the first conversation I usually have with a client is, when you set up a trust, the trustee has power to manage the assets of the trust, but those assets have to be named in the trust. Otherwise, there's no powers, right?
Okay.
And so we also do other documents so that people can have the authority to manage other accounts, like their personal accounts. That's what the power of attorney is for, right? So you can go handle someone's personal accounts if they become incapacitated. So things like funding is a big thing, and all funding is just moving assets from your name into the trust, right? And really, you don't even put it into the name of the trust. You put it into the name of the trustees as trustees of the trust, right? So they hold it in this fiduciary capacity. So basically, we want to move as many assets as we can that still allow you to, manage your assets reasonably into the trust. So now a little bit about incapacity, but I'm going to let Andrew ask those questions.
Thanks, Blaine. As I was mentioning, when I'm doing a loan for someone, whether they have a trust is a question I ask 100% of the time. And when the answer is no, we haven't done that yet, it's always an encouragement on my part to go ahead and do that. And I see very often people will come to terms with their mortality. They know they're going to die. They need to plan on for their death. And so they'll get a trust in place preparing for their death. What I see less often is people don't plan for incapacitation, a prolonged period where they're going to be unable to care for themselves or make decisions on their own behalf. So they planned for the financial part of dying with the trust and a will, but they haven't planned on that period of time where maybe they can't manage their own affairs or Tell me why this is so important, why this is part of a good estate plan is that component of a revocable trust.
Sure.
Oh,
This issue often comes up when we're talking about price of setting up an estate plan. And I think it's because many clients or potential clients don't understand the value of the estate plan and what it brings. They think it's just a document where they're filling in some names and saying, I want everything to go to my kids. And well, I can just do a will. I don't need a trust because I don't have a lot of assets. And that comes into play right there, right? A will is a legal document that's taken to court when someone passes away. It says nothing about incapacity. Sure, you can do some incapacity documents like powers of attorney, but that's going to be difficult because you're going to have to go to each place that you want to use that power of attorney and go through a process of getting them to accept that power of attorney,
yeah,
which can be difficult.
yeah,
So when I talk to clients, I'm like, great, a will is going to be wonderful for you if you pass away. But there is this time of incapacity and it's just growing. I mean, with medical advances,
yeah,
that time between retirement and then starting to have some incapacity issues and that time between incapacity and actual death is just elongating over time. And so now you get to deal with long periods of time of incapacity. And so, what does your trust say about it? What have you talked to your planner about? A revocable living trust allows you to put your assets into a an entity, or not really an entity, but into a contract where if others are seeing that you're starting to have that incapacity issue, and you have to trust your trustees, that's why they're called trustees.
yeah.
You have to trust them to not take advantage of that position that they have, because usually they will have the power to look and say, listen, mom and dad are starting to lose a step. We're going to step in and start taking care of some of these financial and just legal issues for them, and we're going to be the new trustees. And even if mom and dad maybe put up a fight, they can say, yeah, you're incapacitated at this point for these things, right? You can still have a full life
Sure.
and be considered incapacitated for legal and financial decisions. So um, how then is that going to play out? You know, you have to talk to your trustee about a lot of different, or your estate planner about a lot of different things. Who's going to be the trustee, and how are they going to know what powers they have and when to step in? Are you going to be having kind of annual or biannual meetings with the clients and their trustees and advisors and kids and everybody else to tell them what the plan is and who the people are that are going to be stepping in and what everybody's going to be doing? Because if you don't, if you aren't watching it on a year by year basis as you go into kind of those twilight years,
Yeah.
eventually mom and dad are going to lose so much capacity that they may be susceptible to undue influence, to scammers,
Yeah.
to just all sorts of things that can have mismanagement. We see a lot of times where clients just they lose the capacity to kind of keep up with the daily tasks, and
Sure.
so they won't file tax returns for 4 years, and now you've got penalties and everything else where it's not that they didn't want to, they just didn't have the capacity to think about it and do it.
Right.
So if you're not watching for those things, you are going to have kind of a tough time or a harder time keeping track of the assets of the trust. But if you have a trust, you have a good trustee, you have a plan with your planner, you're meeting on a regular basis, you're going to see when it's time to step in. The right people can step in at the right time and help just handle those financial affairs.
How often do you recommend people revisit their trust? Because I'll give you an example. When before my dad passed away, he and his wife had a trust written in the 90s, uh, and their trustee, by the time he came up on incapacitation in the 2010 2012,
Mm-hmm.
their trustee was incapacitated.
Incapacitated as well, yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
revisiting this
yeah,
on some basis, periodic timetable, makes a lot of sense
yeah.
too, right?
Absolutely. We do a plan where we actually meet with our clients every year. That doesn't mean that we're changing the trust or they're adding any extra expense
Right.
to update their trust. You're probably going to update the trust every 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
but you want to look at it every year.
Yeah.
Just like you go and do your taxes every year and you go and talk to your financial planner every year, go and talk to your estate planner every year and make sure that you still want the same people in place,
Yes.
that, what issues have your kids developed as they've gone through their teens and now we've got to do some different planning for them. What are there new people that we need to plan for? Are there incapacity issues? There's all sorts of things to look through. We have a long checklist of things that we send out to these clients when they come in, that they just, we want to know, do they have new bank accounts? We want to go through the funding that we just talked about. We want to know additions or subtractions to the family.
Right.
Any medical issues, any issues or people that have passed away that are their agents, right? Their powers of attorney or trustees or anything like that we need to now update. Ages of people. And we go through all of it and kind of just make sure that the plan still makes sense.
So annual review is a good time frame.
Yeah,
That's great.
definitely. It's like anything else. It's a plan, and if you just take a plan and stick it in a drawer, it's the execution of that plan is not
Oh,
going
I
to be
see it
very
all
good,
the time. I
right?
see old AB trusts from the 90s, and they're harder to navigate, and trustees have become incapacitated.
Yeah.
So great advice.
And oftentimes, it's not your life that's changed, it's trust law or tax law
Yeah.
or something else that has changed. And now there's a whole different set of issues you got to deal with. So that happens all the time too.
Oh, benefit. I could easily see, have a trust written 10 years ago, and three beneficiaries are all in good graces, and then one of them gets themselves, the proverbial written out of the will.
Yeah.
You got to make sure you're updating that stuff, right?
Yeah. And, the Secure Act was a big thing.
Yeah.
The Secure Act came out and all of a sudden retirement plans were handled completely differently. And so we had to change the planning and how we did that. We had to add provisions to a trust to deal with the Secure Act. People didn't realize that had any sort of effect on their trust, but like I said, it's a plan, and you got to effectuate the plan. And without people constantly looking at it, it's not going to really be done very well.
Great advice.
All right.
You got to see a good estate planning attorney like Blaine at the BHR Law Group.
Thanks, Andrew.
All
I
right.
appreciate it.